people ignore them. I should have listened. My first job as a high school senior seemed like a dream come true. The local independent theater was hiring, promising minimum wage, free movies, and an environment that seemed more like a hangout than work. No experience required, the magic words for any teenager eager to earn some cash. Mr. Reyes, the manager, had an intensity that seemed out of place for a cinema boss. His instructions were straightforward. Clean counters, sweep seats, restock concessions, help with ticket sales. But one rule stood out, delivered with a gravity that should have been my first warning. Don't linger after 2 a.m., he'd said, his eyes locked onto mine. Lock up and leave. Immediately. No exceptions. My coworker Elena was friendly but perpetually on edge. She worked with a nervous energy that made me uncomfortable, always rushing to close up, especially on weekends. Once, I caught her whispering to Mr. Reyes, their conversation hushed and tense. "Everything okay?" I'd asked. She'd force a smile. "Just lock up quickly, all right?" The first month passed uneventfully. The routine became comfortable, sweeping floors, selling popcorn, watching snippets of movies between tasks. But something always felt off. It happened on a quiet Friday night. Elena had left early, leaving me alone to finish closing. The theater felt different, silence more substantial, darkness more alive. While wiping down the concession counter, a movement caught my eye in the glass display's reflection. A figure, standing at the far end of the lobby. Motionless, cloaked in shadow. I spun around. Nothing. Get a grip, I told myself. Late nights play tricks on your mind. But my pulse refused to slow down. The parking lot was eerily still when I took out the trash, illuminated by flickering street lights that seemed to pulse with an unnatural rhythm. Soft footsteps echoed behind me. I froze. The footsteps stopped. A shadow slipped behind the theater's side wall. Adrenaline surged. I dropped the trash bag and bolted inside, locking the door. That's when I saw it again. The figure stood just outside, face obscured by what looked like a mask. Watching. Waiting. The next day I confronted Mr. Reyes. To my shock, he seemed unsurprised. "You probably imagined it," he said, his tone flat and dismissive. Elena's later confession came in whispers. "This place is weird," she admitted. "I've seen things. Shadows. Whispers. Footsteps when no one's around." She told me about a previous employee, a man who'd worked late-night screenings, who'd become obsessed, who'd snapped and attacked a coworker while wearing a mask. Some said his spirit still lingered, replaying his final violent moment. My next shift confirmed every terrifying suspicion. The lights flickered. Darkness swallowed the room. Footsteps moved deliberately down the theater aisle, slow, purposeful, coming closer. The projector turned on by itself, casting distorted images of the theater. I saw myself cleaning earlier that night. Then another image, the masked figure standing directly behind me, so close I should have felt its breath. A whisper cut through the silence. "You're late." I ran. I quit the next morning, ignoring Mr. Reyes's calls. Rumors continued to circulate about mysterious accidents, about employees who disappeared during their shifts. I never learned the full truth about what haunted that theater. But some places hold memories darker than the movies they screen. And some stories are better left in the shadows. Suburban landscapes have a way of lulling you into a false sense of security. Row after row of identical houses, meticulously maintained lawns, and neighbors who exchange polite waves but never truly connect. It's a world where danger feels like a distant concept, something that happens in other places to other people. I was 17 that winter, caught in that awkward space between childhood and adulthood, where independence feels like a newly discovered superpower. My parents, both passionate about their weekly chess nights, had invited me to join their gathering at the Thompsons' house down the street. But social gatherings with grown-ups discussing strategy and moving pawns held zero appeal for me. "I'll stay home," I told them, my tone leaving no room for argument. "Enjoy your game." The house settled into silence after they left, a comfortable quiet broken only by the soft patter of rain against the windows. I had the perfect evening planned, a horror movie, some snacks, and complete solitude. The irony would not be lost on me later. By 9:30 p.m., I was fully immersed in No One Gets Out Alive, the movie's tension matching the increasingly dramatic weather outside. The storm seemed to breathe with the film, wind howling, rain drumming against the windows, creating an atmosphere so perfectly creepy it felt almost manufactured. That's when I first heard it, a sound that didn't quite belong. Not the movie, not the storm. Something else. A subtle scrape, a whisper of movement that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I hit pause, straining to listen. Silence crashed around me, dense and oppressive. Just my imagination, I told myself. Don't be weird. But then came 10 p.m., the moment everything changed. A thunderous bang against the front door shattered the quiet. My heart leaped into my throat, pulse racing so fast I could hear nothing but its frantic rhythm. Who would be here now in this weather? Trembling, I crept to the peephole. A woman stood on the porch, her rain-soaked jacket clinging to her slender frame. Water dripped from her hair, creating a small puddle at her feet. Her face was pale, almost translucent in the dim light, her expression a mix of desperation and something else, something I couldn't quite name. "Please," she called, her voice barely audible over the rain. "My car broke down. My phone is dead. Can I use yours to call for help?" Something felt wrong. Her car was still running at the curb, engine humming, an incongruous detail that sent warning signals racing through my mind. Before I could process the thought fully, movement caught my eye. A figure in a black hoodie sprinted toward the house, a gun glinting menacingly in his hand. In that split second, survival instinct took over. I slammed the door, twisting every lock, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The woman's plea turned to a scream. The man began pounding furiously, his rage palpable even through the solid wood. What happened next would be etched into my memory forever. A nightmare of shattered glass, frantic 911 calls, and shadows moving through my home like predators hunting prey. By the time police arrived, the intruders had vanished. But the evidence they left behind told a chilling story. A stolen car, ominous tools of violence, and blood that linked the man to multiple home invasions. That night, the quiet suburban street revealed its true nature. Safety was nothing more than an illusion, and I was no longer the naive teenager who believed nothing exciting ever happened in our neighborhood. Some nights, even now, I wake up listening for those footsteps, wondering what would have happened if I'd opened that door. Christmas has always been a time of reunion, of reconnecting with family members who drift in and out of our lives like seasonal winds. That year, the holiday would bring more than just festive cheer, it would unveil a mystery that would haunt me for years to come. It was Christmas Day, and our home was transformed into a bustling hub of family activity. Relatives from near and far converged, filling the rooms with laughter, conversation, and the warm aroma of holiday dishes. I was 16, excited to see cousins I hadn't encountered in 3 years, anticipating a day of catching up and celebration. Between 11:30 a.m. and 1 p.m., the house came alive. Greetings echoed through the rooms, and the dining table quickly became a colorful mosaic of shared dishes. Among the familiar faces was one I'd never met before, Uncle Marcus, my father's cousin from California. From the moment he arrived, something about him felt distinctly off. Marcus wasn't overtly strange. He brought a fruit salad, wore a cheerful attitude, and mingled with the family. But there was something beneath the surface, a tension, a hidden current of unease that I couldn't quite define. Perhaps it was the way his eyes would drift, lingering on objects around the house with an intensity that seemed out of place. Lunch was served around 2:30 p.m. As we sat together, sharing stories and updating each other on our lives, Marcus seemed to be listening more than speaking. His gaze would occasionally drift to the walls, to the family photos, to the antique clock in the hallway, always watching, always observing. Later that afternoon, I retreated to my bedroom to take a call from my best friend. Typical teenage conversation about Christmas plans and gifts filled the next 15 minutes. When I hung up and prepared to rejoin the family, a knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. It was Marcus. "Come in," I called, surprised by his sudden appearance. He stepped into the room, his eyes scanning the space with an unsettling curiosity. "How's school?" he asked, but there was something calculated about his tone. Then, without warning, he posed a strange question that would echo in my mind for years to come. "Have you ever noticed anything unusual in this house?" I blinked, caught off guard. "Unusual? Like what?" A cryptic smile played across his lips. "Oh, I don't know," he said. "Sometimes old houses have their secrets." The conversation was brief, but it left an indelible mark. As the day progressed, Marcus's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He would wander through the house, pausing to stare at random objects, family photos, the hallway clock, and most curiously, the basement door. When I caught him standing by the basement entrance, staring intently, I asked what he was doing. "Just curious," he replied quickly, his demeanor shifting. By 9 p.m., most of the family had departed. Marcus was invited to stay overnight, a decision that filled me with an inexplicable sense of unease. That night, I heard creaking downstairs, Footsteps, the opening of the basement door, subtle movements that suggested someone was exploring. Curiosity overcame my apprehension. I crept downstairs and found Marcus in the basement, using a flashlight to examine something on the floor. When I called out, he jumped, quickly switching off the light. The next morning, Marcus was gone. My parents said he'd left early to catch a flight, but something didn't feel right. Investigating the basement, I discovered a loose floorboard near the back wall. Hidden underneath was a small, dusty box containing old letters and photographs dating back to the 1940s. The contents seemed mundane, just old memories of previous homeowners. But the mystery remained: why was Marcus so interested? What secrets was he searching for? To this day, the questions linger. That Christmas became less about family reunion and more about an unsolved mystery, a puzzle with Marcus at its center, forever just beyond my understanding. The first days of college are supposed to be about discovery, new friends, exciting classes, and the promise of independence. For me, it became a descent into a nightmare that would redefine my understanding of safety. Queens College welcomed me with a mix of excitement and terror. Coming from Chicago, I was already an outsider, desperate to find my place in the bustling film studies program. Orientation day was a blur of unfamiliar faces and anxious introductions. Amid the chaos, one person stood out, and not in a good way. Dylan was impossible to ignore, though I desperately wished I could erase him from my memory. From the start, something about him felt fundamentally wrong. He spoke loudly about obscure films, inserting himself into conversations with a desperation that made everyone uncomfortable. His jokes fell flat, his stories seemed fabricated, and his presence was like a cold draft in an otherwise warm room. Our small friend group tolerated him at first. It was easier to let Dylan hover at the edges of our conversations than to confront the growing unease he provoked. But tolerance has its limits. One evening over dinner, Mary Kate dropped a bombshell that confirmed our collective suspicions. "Did you hear about Dylan?" she asked, her voice low. "A couple of girls said he's been following them back to their dorms. They're terrified." The words hung in the air, transforming Dylan from an awkward nuisance to a genuine threat. I started avoiding him, a careful dance of strategic positioning and quick exits. But Dylan was persistent. He seemed to have a supernatural ability to find me, to insert himself into spaces where he wasn't wanted. His conversations became increasingly erratic, a mix of self-pity and barely concealed anger. "Why does everyone look at me like I'm a freak?" he would ask, his voice trembling with a dangerous intensity. One afternoon, something inside me snapped. "Maybe it's because you don't respect people's boundaries," I found myself saying. "Not everything has to be about you." The look he gave me was a mixture of hurt and something darker, something that made my blood run cold. Thanksgiving break should have been a reprieve. I returned home to Chicago, looking forward to family comfort and a temporary escape from campus tensions. But Dylan had other plans. One night, as I sat in my bedroom, a knock against the window shattered the peaceful silence. I pulled back the curtain and froze. Dylan was standing outside, illuminated by streetlights, his presence a violation of every boundary I thought I'd established. My parents didn't believe me at first. When we checked, he was gone, vanished like a phantom. But I knew what I'd seen. The following weeks became a psychological warfare. Strange occurrences began to pile up. A notebook mysteriously moved between locations. My dorm key disappeared and reappeared. I felt constantly watched, my sense of security systematically dismantled. A note arrived taped to my door. Dylan's handwriting was shaky, almost feral. "You don't get to ignore me. We're not finished." Campus security became my lifeline. I reported everything: the stalking, the unexplained incidents, the constant feeling of being hunted. They listened, but the shadows of uncertainty remained. Footsteps outside my window. Fresh tracks in the snow. The constant, gnawing fear that Dylan was always just one step behind me. Eventually the incidents stopped. Dylan disappeared from campus, rumored to have been expelled. But disappeared doesn't mean gone. The experience fundamentally changed me. I became hypervigilant, careful about personal information, always looking over my shoulder. Some experiences leave invisible scars. Dylan taught me that some monsters don't need supernatural powers, they just need opportunity and a complete disregard for human boundaries. My first job was supposed to be simple. A teenager's dream, working at a local cinema surrounded by movies, free popcorn, and the promise of minimum wage. What I didn't anticipate was the darkness that lurked between the rows of velvet seats, waiting to unveil a nightmare that would haunt me long after the credits rolled. The Regal Cinema was a small, independent theater tucked away in a quiet corner of town. Mr. Harlow, the manager, had an intensity that seemed out of place for a movie theater boss. His instructions were precise: clean the counters, sweep the cinema seats, restock concessions, and help my coworker Sarah with ticket sales. But there was one rule that stood out, a warning delivered with such gravity that it sent a chill down my spine. "Don't linger after 2 a.m., he'd said, his eyes boring into mine. "Lock up and leave. Immediately. No exceptions." The first month passed uneventfully. Sarah was friendly but reserved, always in a hurry to close up shop. Her nervous energy was infectious, though I couldn't quite put my finger on its source. She'd rush through closing procedures, her eyes constantly darting to the corners of the theater, as if expecting something to emerge from the shadows. Everything changed on a quiet Friday night. Sarah had left early, leaving me alone to finish the closing routine. The theater felt different, the silence more pronounced, the darkness more substantial. As I wiped down the concession counter, a movement caught my eye in the glass display's reflection. Just a glimpse, a figure standing at the far end of the lobby. Motionless. Cloaked in shadow. I spun around. Nothing. "Get a grip," I told myself. "It's late, you're tired." But my pulse refused to slow down. I finished cleaning with a speed born of growing anxiety. The parking lot was eerily still, illuminated by flickering street lights that seemed to pulse with an unnatural rhythm. As I approached the dumpster, soft footsteps echoed behind me. I froze. The footsteps stopped. When I turned, I caught a glimpse of movement, a shadow slipping behind the theater's side wall. Adrenaline surged. I dropped the trash bag and bolted inside, locking the door. That's when I saw it again. The figure stood just outside, face obscured by what looked like a mask. Watching. Waiting. The next day, I confronted Mr. Harlow. To my shock, he seemed unsurprised. "You probably imagined it," he said, his tone flat and dismissive. Sarah's confession came later, whispered with a mixture of fear and resignation. "This place is weird," she admitted. "I've seen things. Shadows. Whispers. Footsteps when no one's around." She told me a story about a previous employee, a man who'd worked late-night screenings, who'd become obsessed, who'd snapped and attacked a coworker while wearing a mask. Some said his spirit still lingered, replaying his final violent moment. My next shift alone in the theater confirmed every terrifying suspicion. The lights flickered. Darkness swallowed the room. Footsteps moved deliberately down the theater aisle, slow, purposeful, coming closer. A projector turned on by itself, casting distorted images of the theater. I saw myself cleaning earlier that night. Then another image, the masked figure standing directly behind me, so close I should have felt its breath. A whisper cut through the silence. "You're late." I ran. I quit the next morning, ignoring Mr. Harlow's calls. Rumors continued to circulate about mysterious accidents, about employees who disappeared during their shifts. I never learned the full truth about what haunted that theater. But some places hold memories darker than the movies they screen. And some stories are better left in the shadows. Some say dogs are man's best friend. But Rocky was more than a friend. He was my guardian, my protector, a living shield between me and a darkness I never saw coming. My home sat at the edge of a dense forest, a small wooden cottage that offered both solitude and a connection to the wild. Late November had draped the landscape in a crisp, cold embrace. The nights grew longer, darker, more intense. Those evenings typically found Rocky and me in a comfortable routine. Him sprawled by the door, me nestled on the couch with a book or a movie, the world outside reduced to the whisper of wind through bare trees. Rocky wasn't just any dog. He was a German shepherd with a coat of rich brown fur, sharp black markings, and a fluffy tail that seemed to have a language of its own. But beyond his beautiful exterior was an intelligence and protective instinct that would save my life. That night began like any other. The wind howled with an unusual intensity, making the house creak and groan. I was wrapped in a soft blanket, a steaming mug of tea warming my hands. Rocky lay near the door, seemingly half asleep, his head resting on his paws. But something was different. Suddenly Rocky's entire demeanor changed. His ears perked up, body tensing like a coiled spring. His low growl vibrated through the room, cutting through the wind's constant moaning. I'd seen Rocky protective before, but this was different. This was pure, primal alertness. "What is it, boy?" I asked, though I didn't expect an answer. He didn't move, didn't bark. Just stared intently at the door, every muscle ready to spring into action. I approached the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to peek out. The yard looked empty, moonlight casting long shadows from the surrounding trees. Nothing seemed amiss. "See," I said, turning back to Rocky. "There's nothing." Before I could finish, Rocky erupted into action. He sprang to his feet, barking loudly, nails scratching against the wooden floor as he skidded to a stop by the door. His nose pressed against the bottom of the door, a sound between a growl and a bark filling the room. Then I heard it. A soft, almost imperceptible sound. The crunch of footsteps on gravel. Someone was outside. My hands started shaking as I dialed emergency services. The dispatcher's calm voice was a lifeline as I reported the potential intrusion, Rocky's barking growing more fierce with each passing moment. A loud bang against the door, not a knock but a deliberate attempt to force entry. Rocky threw his full weight against the door, teeth bared, a sound of pure protective fury erupting from deep in his chest. The door burst open. A man wearing dark clothes and a mask stepped inside, his broad frame filling the doorway. For a moment everything stopped. Rocky didn't hesitate. He launched himself at the intruder with a speed that seemed supernatural. Before the man could fully process what was happening, Rocky clamped his powerful jaws onto the man's arm. Blood stained the sleeve as the intruder screamed, a raw, guttural sound of pain and shock. The man managed to shove Rocky off, but not before sustaining significant injury. He fled into the darkness, clutching his bleeding arm. Rocky chased him to the edge of the yard, barking furiously until silence returned. When he trotted back to me, tail wagging as if nothing extraordinary had happened, I realized something profound. Rocky wasn't just a pet. He was a protector, a guardian who would risk everything to keep me safe. That night changed everything. The broken door remained a testament to Rocky's courage, a reminder that sometimes our guardians come with 4 legs and a heart bigger than we could ever imagine. We had dreamed of the perfect family Christmas, a magical escape to Greenland, far from the chaos of London, surrounded by pristine snow and untouched landscapes. What we found instead was a nightmare that would tear our family apart forever. The journey began with hope and excitement. My husband and I, along with our 4 children and my siblings, had planned this adventure as a way to reconnect, to create memories that would last a lifetime. We arrived late on December 23rd, the crisp Greenlandic night embracing us with its silent, snow-laden beauty. Our rented chalet nestled amid frosted hills promised a peaceful holiday retreat. Christmas Eve was everything we'd imagined. Laughter filled the living room as the children tore into presents, the warmth of family love battling the bitter cold outside. A hearty breakfast followed, and by noon, we were bundled up and heading to a nearby mountain trail. The landscape was breathtaking, trees covered in sparkling frost, the world reduced to shades of white and silver. 15 minutes into our hike, everything changed. They appeared without warning, 3 men in black ski masks, materializing from the wilderness like vengeful spirits. One held a knife, the other 2 brandished small but menacing pistols. The isolation of our surroundings became terrifyingly real. We were completely alone, miles from any possible help. "Don't scream. Don't run," the tallest man commanded, his voice cold and detached. Our children huddled close, fear etching itself into their young faces. My husband tried to remain calm, whispering reassurances, but I could see the helplessness burning in his eyes. We complied, handing over phones, wallets, watches, anything of value. But they weren't satisfied. The shortest man, jittery and aggressive, rifled through our bags. "This is all?" he snapped, frustration evident in his voice. Then, in a moment that would haunt us forever, he grabbed my youngest son, Liam. Just 6 years old, he was suddenly torn from my arms, his terrified cries piercing the silent winter landscape. "We need leverage," the man said, "in case they report us." My husband lunged forward, but the gunman raised his weapon. "Stay back or he's done," he growled. Time seemed to fracture. The world reduced to Liam's screams, growing fainter as the masked men dragged him into the dense woods. We stood frozen, my siblings holding me back as I screamed, pleaded, desperate to run after them. The drive to the police station was a blur of grief and terror. Officers listened with somber expressions that spoke volumes. In this remote wilderness, the chances of finding Liam were slim. Our trip cut short, we returned to London. But home was no longer home. The weight of loss pressed down on us, transforming our once happy family into ghosts of ourselves. My other children grew quiet, their laughter replaced by cautious whispers. My husband and I struggled to hold each other up, each wrestling with unbearable guilt. Weeks turned into months. The search continued, but hope dwindled with each passing day. The police calls became less frequent, their voices more reserved. Every Christmas since has been a painful reminder of that moment. The day we lost Liam. The day our family was shattered by 3 masked strangers in the frozen wilderness of Greenland. Some losses leave wounds that never heal. Some memories become a permanent winter in the heart, cold, unforgiving, endless. Some places are better left unexplored. Some doors are meant to remain closed. But curiosity has always been a more dangerous companion than any ghost. It was a typical Texas weekend, the kind that begs for adventure. My friend Marcus had a knack for finding the most unconventional experiences, and this time he discovered an abandoned mental hospital on the outskirts of town. People say it's haunted, he told me, his eyes gleaming with the excitement of potential discovery. I wasn't entirely convinced. Urban exploration had never been my thing, but Marcus had a way of making even the most mundane adventure sound like an epic quest. What could possibly happen in broad daylight? I thought, trying to convince myself as much as him. The hospital loomed before us like a monument to forgotten suffering. Massive and decaying, it seemed to breathe with its own malevolent life. Broken windows gaped like empty eye sockets, graffiti scarred its crumbling walls, and the front door hung precariously, swaying slightly in the breeze as if beckoning us inside. "Looks like it'll fall on us," I joked, kicking at some rubble near the entrance. Marcus laughed, his bravado pushing us forward into the darkness. The interior was a testament to abandonment. Stale air thick with the smell of mold and something metallic, something I couldn't quite place, filled our lungs. Sunlight struggled through broken windows, creating pools of light that seemed to highlight the building's decay. Hallways stretched endlessly, lined with doors mostly closed, some open just a crack, as if inviting us to explore their secrets. We wandered for a while, finding nothing but empty rooms and broken furniture. Marcus made jokes, tapping on walls and calling out, expecting some supernatural response. I laughed along, but something felt off. The building seemed to be watching us, waiting. Then we found the room. Tucked behind a heavy steel door, it was different from the others. The walls bore strange black symbols, the air noticeably colder. As we stepped inside, the first sound caught us off guard. Children laughing. At first, it was faint, like a distant memory. But it grew louder, echoing through the empty corridors. Marcus rolled his eyes. "Probably kids outside trying to mess with us," he said. But something didn't feel right. Soft thuds began, like small rocks hitting the walls. We followed the sound, the laughter growing more intense. When we reached the front door and stepped outside, the yard was completely empty. No children, no source of the sound. "There's no way they ran off that fast," Marcus muttered, confusion replacing his earlier bravado. We called out, challenging whatever was playing with us. Silence answered, broken only by the wind rustling through overgrown grass. Then the laughter started again. But this time it was coming from inside the building. When we returned, everything had changed. The room we'd first explored was now empty, no chairs, no table. The doors seemed to move on their own, opening and closing with a will that defied explanation. We didn't speak as we left. The laughter followed us, a constant whisper just beyond hearing. Some experiences defy explanation. Some places hold memories that refuse to be forgotten. And some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed again. That abandoned mental hospital wasn't just a building. It was a tomb of forgotten stories, of pain and madness that lingered long after the patients were gone. And we had disturbed something that was never meant to be awakened. Winter nights have a magic all their own. The world transforms into a landscape of silence, of soft white wonder that muffles sound and blurs the lines between reality and imagination. I was 8 years old and I believed in that magic, right up until the moment I discovered some mysteries are better left unexplained. That particular night was perfect in the way only childhood winter nights can be. Snow fell steadily outside, creating a mesmerizing dance of white against the streetlights. The heater hummed quietly, a comforting background noise that made the world feel safe and predictable. My father's bedtime routine was always the same. He'd tuck me in, pull the blanket up to my chin, pat my head and whisper, "Sleep tight." The ritual was a choreography of comfort, a nightly reassurance that all was right with the world. But this night would be different. After my dad's footsteps faded and I heard the creak of his bedroom door, I waited. The house settled into its nighttime quiet, but I was wide awake, captivated by the snow outside my window. It was a Christmas card scene, pristine and untouched, glowing orange under the streetlights. Tiny footprints caught my eye, leading toward the woods. A rabbit, perhaps. Or a fox. The world outside seemed alive with possibility, a silent movie playing just for me. Then came the sound. A loud bang against my bedroom door that made me gasp, my heart leaping into my throat. How settling, I told myself. Just the heater. Just the wind. But when I turned, everything changed. Standing in the doorway was a figure. Small. About my height. But something was fundamentally wrong. It wasn't a shadow. It wasn't a person. It was a presence that seemed to absorb light, a solid blackness so complete it looked like a void cut from the fabric of reality. No features. No eyes. No mouth. Just a shape of absolute darkness standing motionless in my doorway. Hello? I whispered, my voice barely a sound. Silence answered. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call for my parents. But something, some primal survival instinct, kept me frozen, my throat tight, breath caught in my chest. I turned back to the window, unable to look directly at the figure. Maybe if I ignored it, it would go away. The snow outside no longer looked magical. It looked cold. Empty. Like the world had been wiped clean of all warmth and wonder. How long I stood there, I can't say. Minutes felt like hours. The house was impossibly quiet, the only sound my own thundering heartbeat. When I finally gathered the courage to look back, the figure was gone. I ran to my bed, dove under the covers, and pulled the blanket over my head. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it might burst through my chest. The next morning, my parents dismissed my story. Probably just a shadow, my mother said, patting my hand. Or a dream. But I knew what I saw. I was awake. Wide awake. The figure never returned. But on winter nights, when snow falls softly and the house grows quiet, I remember. I remember the darkness that stood in my doorway, watching. Waiting. Doing nothing. And sometimes, doing nothing is far more terrifying than anything else.